The Broken Shield. The message that changed everything. Commander Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck of Station Omega, watching the morning sun cast golden light across the surface of New Geneva below. The colony planet looked peaceful from orbit, its blue oceans and green continents reminding her of old Earth. 2 million humans called this place home, and they had built something beautiful here. Cities that gleamed like jewels, farms that fed the population, universities where children learned about the wonders of the galaxy. She never imagined that in 6 hours, half of it would be ash. "Commander," called Lieutenant Marcus Chen from behind her. His voice carried a tension that made Elena's stomach clench. "Priority transmission from the outer perimeter. It's them." Elena closed her eyes for a moment. She had hoped they would have more time. 3 weeks ago, long-range sensors had detected the massive fleet approaching their system. The Zephyrian Empire, conquerors of 17 star systems, had finally turned their attention to humanity's small corner of space. The main screen flickered to life, showing the face that had become the stuff of nightmares across human space. Supreme Commander Krath of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet looked like a walking shadow, his black skin seeming to absorb light itself. His 4 arms moved with predatory grace, and his silver eyes held no warmth, no mercy, no recognition of other beings as equals. "Humans," Krath's voice was like ice scraping against metal. "Your species has expanded beyond your designated boundaries. You have colonized worlds that belong to the Empire. You have violated the natural order of the galaxy." Elena stepped forward, her jaw tight. She knew this was a lie. New Geneva and the 12 other human colonies were in sectors that had been empty for millennia. But truth didn't matter to the Zephyrians. They saw humans as insects that had grown too numerous, too bold. "I am Supreme Commander Krath," the alien continued. "I speak for Emperor Zalthak and the might of 10,000 warships. You will surrender your colonies immediately. Your ships will be destroyed. Your people will be relocated to designated containment worlds. Any resistance will be met with total annihilation." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Elena looked around at her staff, seeing fear and determination warring in their faces. These were good people, brave people, but they knew the odds. Humanity's entire military force consisted of maybe 800 ships scattered across 14 systems. The Zephyrians had brought 10,000. "How long do we have?" Elena asked. 12 hours, reported Navigation Officer Sarah Kim. "Their advance fleet is already at the edge of the system. Main force will be here by tomorrow." Elena nodded grimly. She had been preparing for this moment ever since taking command of the colony's defenses. "Signal all civilian transports to begin immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel. Priority to children and families." "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, "the transport ships can maybe save 50,000 people. We have 2 million down there." The weight of those numbers settled on Elena's shoulders like a crushing burden. She was 43 years old, had served in space for 20 years, had commanded ships and stations through pirate raids and asteroid storms, but nothing had prepared her for this moment when the survival of her species hung in the balance. The first strike. The attack came at dawn, New Geneva time. Elena watched from the command center as the first wave of Zephyrian fighters screamed down through the atmosphere. They moved like silver bullets, their energy weapons painting lines of destruction across the morning sky. The planetary defense grid responded immediately. Orbital platforms and ground-based missile systems opened fire, filling space with interceptor rockets and laser beams. For a few minutes, Elena allowed herself to hope. The defenses were holding. Enemy fighters were being shot down. Then the Zephyrian capital ships arrived. Elena had seen the intelligence reports, had studied the technical specifications, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of seeing a Zephyrian dreadnought in battle. The ship was 3 kilometers long, shaped like a massive spear, its hull covered in weapons that pulsed with malevolent energy. When it fired its main cannon, the beam was so bright it hurt to look at even through the filtered screens. The first shot vaporized Defense Platform 7 and 300 brave souls with it. The second shot carved a canyon 20 kilometers long through the mountains south of New Geneva City. The third shot hit the planetary shield generator, and suddenly the planet lay naked under alien guns. "All human ships, this is Admiral Torres aboard the Defiant," came a voice over the fleet channel. Helena knew Admiral Carlos Torres well. He was a good man, a careful strategist, but she could hear the desperation in his voice. "All vessels, engage the enemy. For humanity." The human fleet, such as it was, charged forward to meet the Zephyrian armada. Elena watched through her sensors as 200 human ships faced off against 3,000 alien vessels. The battle was magnificent and terrible, a light show that lit up the space around New Geneva like a deadly fireworks display. The human ships fought with courage that would have made their ancestors proud. The destroyer Courage rammed a Zephyrian cruiser, taking both ships down in a ball of fusion fire. The frigate Hope used her speed to dart between larger ships, her guns blazing as she tried to protect the slower vessels. Captain Rebecca Stone of the battleship Independence held her position even as enemy fire stripped away her armor, her weapons firing until the very end. But courage wasn't enough. The Zephyrians had better weapons, stronger shields, faster ships. One by one, the human vessels died. Elena watched the tactical display as green dots representing human ships winked out of existence, replaced by the expanding spheres of debris that had once been proud warships and brave crews. In 30 minutes, it was over. Of 200 human ships, 15 survived, and most of those were badly damaged and fleeing toward the outer system. Admiral Torres was dead, along with 8,000 naval personnel. The Zephyrian fleet barely showed any damage at all. The ancient secret. Elena stared at the tactical display, watching as Zephyrian landing craft began their descent toward New Geneva's surface. In 6 hours, millions of humans would be dead or enslaved. The thought made her feel hollow inside, as if someone had scooped out her soul with a cold spoon. "Commander," Marcus said softly, "maybe we should consider the surrender terms. At least some people would survive on the containment worlds." Elena turned to look at her lieutenant. Marcus was 28, brilliant, and had a wife and 2 young children on New Geneva. She understood why he would want to grasp at any chance of survival, even a slim one. "The Zephyrians don't keep promises to species they consider inferior," she said quietly. "The containment worlds are labor camps. Humans would be worked to death in their mines and factories. Within a generation, our species would be extinct." She walked to her private office adjoining the command center. On her desk sat a sealed container that had been delivered to her when she took command 2 years ago. The orders that came with it were simple and terrifying. Open only when humanity faces total extinction. Elena had hoped never to see the contents of that container. Now, with Zephyrian troops preparing to land on New Geneva, she broke the seal with shaking hands. Inside was a single data chip and a note written in the handwriting of Admiral Jessica Park, the legendary commander who had led humanity's expansion into space 50 years ago. The note was brief. "If you are reading this, then our worst fears have come true. Humanity faces an enemy we cannot defeat through conventional means. The chip contains coordinates and activation codes for Project Ghost Protocol. Use them only if you are willing to pay the ultimate price for our species' survival. May God forgive us all for what we built in the darkness." Elena inserted the chip into her personal computer. The files that appeared made her blood run cold. Project Ghost Protocol. 12 ships built in secret facilities in the void between stars. Ships that used technology humanity had sworn never to use. Ships that required crews willing to die horribly for a chance at victory. The technical specifications read like something from a nightmare. Quantum singularity, drives that warped space-time itself, weapons that could unravel matter at the atomic level, hulls that existed partially outside normal reality. And the cost. Any human crew member exposed to the ship's systems would be dead within days from radiation poisoning and dimensional displacement sickness. Elena read the crew requirements. Volunteers only. Terminal cases preferred. People who were dying anyway and wanted their deaths to mean something. The ships had been launched 30 years ago and were hidden in deep space, waiting for this moment. Her hand shook as she read the final file. The Ghost Protocol had been created after humanity's first contact with hostile aliens. A group of scientists and military leaders had asked a simple question: what if we faced an enemy so powerful that conventional weapons were useless? Their answer was to build weapons so terrible that they violated every treaty humanity had signed, every moral principle they held dear. "Commander," Marcus's voice came from the doorway. "The Zephyrians are demanding our immediate surrender. They're giving us 1 hour to respond." Elena looked up at her lieutenant, seeing in his young face all the hope and potential that humanity represented. Marcus would grow old in Zephyrian slave camps, watching his children work themselves to death in alien mines, unless she was willing to become a monster to save them. She made her decision. "The protocol awakens. Marcus, I need you to send a coded transmission on the old military emergency channel," Elena said, her voice steady despite the storm in her heart. "Send this exactly. Ghost Protocol Authorization Omega 77. The wolves are at the door. All units respond immediately." Marcus frowned as he copied down the message. "Commander, what's Ghost Protocol?" "Something I hope will save us all," Elena replied. "And something I pray humanity can forgive me for unleashing." The transmission went out on a frequency that hadn't been used in 30 years, racing at light speed toward coordinates in the void where 12 ships waited in the darkness. Ships built by desperate humans who understood that sometimes survival required becoming the thing your enemies feared most. As Elena waited for a response, she watched Zephyrian shuttles landing on New Geneva's surface. Soon, alien soldiers would be marching through the streets where human children played. The thought filled her with a rage so pure it felt like ice in her veins. The Zephyrians thought they were conquering a weak species. They thought humans would beg for mercy, would surrender their freedom for the promise of survival. They were about to learn that humans were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. In the depths of space, ancient systems came online. Ships that should not exist began to move. And somewhere in the darkness, crews of dying volunteers prepared to show the galaxy what humanity became when pushed beyond desperation into the realm of absolute fury. Elena stood at her window, watching the enemy ships fill the sky above New Geneva. Soon, very soon, those ships would learn to fear the darkness between the stars. They had wanted to exterminate humanity. They were about to discover that some prey, when cornered, transforms into something far worse than any predator. When ghosts awaken, shadows in the void. The response came 3 hours later, transmitted on a frequency so old that Elena had to dig through archived communication protocols to decode it. When the message finally appeared on her screen, it consisted of just 2 words: "Ghosts rising." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, 12 ships that shouldn't exist were moving toward New Geneva. Ships crewed by people who had volunteered to die for humanity's survival. She tried not to think about what that meant, about the desperate souls who had signed up for a one-way mission into the heart of hell. On the surface below, Zephyrian ground forces were landing in the major population centers. Elena watched through satellite feeds as alien soldiers marched through the streets of New Geneva City, their weapons forcing terrified civilians into detention centers. The sight made her hands clench into fists. Every minute that passed meant more humans were dying or being enslaved. "Commander," Lieutenant Marcus Chen called from his station, "we're detecting massive hyperspace distortions at the edge of the system. Something big is coming through." Elena turned to the main tactical display. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. 12 new contacts had appeared on the sensors, but they weren't showing up like normal ships. Their signatures were wrong, twisted, as if they existed partially outside normal spacetime. "Can you get a visual?" she asked. The main screen flickered, and Elena got her first look at humanity's darkest secret. The Ghost Protocol ships looked like nightmares given form. Each vessel was roughly the size of a heavy cruiser, but their hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometries that hurt to look at covered their surfaces, and they moved through space in ways that violated basic physics. "My God," whispered Marcus. "What are those things?" Before Elena could answer, a new voice crackled over the communication system. It sounded human, but there was something wrong with it, as if the speaker was in constant pain. "New Geneva Command. This is Captain David Morrison of the Ghost Ship Reaper. Ghost Protocol is now active. All civilian personnel are ordered to seek immediate shelter. What follows will not be pleasant to witness." Elena recognized the name. Captain Morrison had been reported killed in action 15 years ago during a skirmish with pirates. Apparently, death was more complicated for Ghost Protocol volunteers. "Captain Morrison, this is Commander Vasquez. The Zephyrian fleet has over 3,000 ships. Can 12 vessels really make a difference?" A sound that might have been laughter came through the speaker. "Commander, we're not really ships anymore. We're weapons. Weapons built by humans who understood that sometimes you have to become a monster to fight monsters. Watch and learn what your species is capable of when we stop pretending to be civilized." The Reapers dance. The first sign that something had changed came when the Zephyrian fleet's sensors began malfunctioning. Elena watched the tactical display as enemy ships started reporting contact with vessels that weren't there, weapons fire from empty space, and gravitational anomalies that defied explanation. Supreme Commander Krath's face appeared on the communication screen, his 4 arms gesturing angrily. "Human Commander, what trickery is this? Our sensors detect nothing, but our ships are reporting attacks from invisible enemies." Elena smiled for the first time in days. "No trickery, Commander. You wanted to see what humanity is capable of when we're desperate. Congratulations. You're about to get a demonstration." The first ghost ship strike came without warning. The Reaper, Captain Morrison's vessel, simply appeared in the middle of a Zephyrian squadron formation. One moment there was empty space. The next moment a ship of nightmares materialized and opened fire. The weapons that emerged from the Reaper didn't behave like normal energy beams or projectiles. They looked like tears in reality itself, black lines that cut through space and into the alien vessels. Where they touched Zephyrian hulls, matter simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, just gone as if it had never been there at all. 3 Zephyrian destroyers died in the first volley, their crews having just enough time to scream before sections of their ships were edited out of existence. The Reaper vanished again before the remaining alien vessels could target it, leaving behind only expanding clouds of debris and the echo of something that sounded like tortured laughter. "Impossible," Krath snarled. "No species has technology like this. What have you done?" Elena's smile turned cold. "We've shown you what happens when humans stop playing by the rules. The Ghost Fleet unleashes hell." What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a masterclass in terror, a demonstration of what humanity could become when they embraced their darkest nature. The 12 ghost ships moved through the Zephyrian fleet like death incarnate, appearing and disappearing at will, striking with weapons that violated the fundamental laws of physics. The ghost ship Phantom, commanded by Captain Sarah Liu, specialized in temporal distortion. Her attacks didn't just destroy enemy vessels, they erased them from time itself. Zephyrian ships would simply cease to have ever existed, leaving their allies with confused memories of comrades who had never been there. Captain James Rodriguez of the Spectre used dimensional manipulation. His ship could reach through normal space to strike at targets from impossible angles. Zephyrian commanders watched in horror as their vessels were torn apart by weapons fire that came from inside their own hulls. The Wraith under Captain Maria Santos was perhaps the most terrifying of all. Her ship existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously present and absent. When she attacked, the Wraith would become real just long enough to fire weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Enemy ships struck by her guns didn't just die. They experienced death across infinite parallel realities. Alina watched the tactical display as the Zephyrian fleet, which had seemed so invincible just hours before, began to collapse into chaos. Ships were fleeing in all directions, their crews panicking as they faced enemies they couldn't understand, couldn't predict, couldn't fight. All ghost ships. This is Commander Vasquez. Alina transmitted. The enemy fleet is breaking. Pursue and destroy. No survivors. The response came from Captain Morrison, and his voice now carried a note of something that might have been glee, if glee could be filtered through the static of dimensional displacement. Copy that, Commander. We've been dead for so long, we'd forgotten how good it feels to make others join us. The price of victory. The slaughter that followed would be remembered as the Phantom Hour, 60 minutes that changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The ghost ships hunted the fleeing Zephyrian vessels like wolves pursuing scattered sheep. No alien ship was fast enough to escape, no armor strong enough to resist weapons that operated outside the normal laws of physics. Supreme Commander Kraft's flagship, the mighty dreadnought Dominator, lasted longer than most. Alina watched as the massive vessel fought desperately against 3 ghost ships, its weapons firing continuously even as reality warped around it. In the end, it took a combined assault from the Reaper, the Phantom, and the Spectre to bring the ship down. When it died, it took with it the hopes of Zephyrian conquest. Of the 3,000 ships that had entered the new Geneva system, fewer than 50 escaped to carry word of what they had witnessed back to the Zephyrian Empire. The rest were debris floating in space, testament to what humans could accomplish when they abandoned their moral limitations. But victory came with a price that made Alina's heart ache. As the battle ended, she received final transmissions from the ghost ship crews. The radiation and dimensional exposure that allowed their vessels to function was killing them faster than anticipated. "Commander, this is Captain Morrison," came the dying man's voice. "Ghost Protocol mission accomplished. The enemy is broken. But our time is up. The ships, they're not meant for long-term operation. We're dying. All of us." Alina closed her eyes, feeling tears she had held back for hours finally begin to fall. "Captain, you've saved humanity. Your sacrifice." "No sacrifice," Morrison interrupted, and there was peace in his voice now. "We were already dead, remember? This just gave our deaths meaning. Take care of the living, Commander. Don't let them forget what we did here. Don't let them forget what humans are capable of when pushed too far." One by one, the ghost ships sent their final messages. 12 captains, 12 crews, all volunteers who had chosen to die horribly so that their species might live. The ships themselves began to fade, their impossible technology finally breaking down under the strain of existing partially outside reality. The aftermath. In the weeks that followed, word of the Battle of New Geneva spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The Zephyrian Empire, which had conquered 17 star systems, suddenly found itself facing rebellions on every world. Species that had submitted to alien rule heard about the ghost ships and began to hope again. The Zephyrians themselves were broken. Their military caste, which had never known defeat, was paralyzed by fear of these phantom human vessels that could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and disappear before retaliation was possible. Emperor Zelthak himself sent envoys to Earth, offering peace treaties and reparations. But Alina knew the real cost of their victory. Humanity had saved itself by becoming something monstrous. The Ghost Protocol had been a one-time weapon. The technology was too dangerous to use regularly, too destructive to the crews who operated it. They had won by sacrificing their souls, by proving they could be more ruthless than their enemies. Standing in her office aboard Station Omega, Alina looked out at the stars and wondered what humanity had become. They had shown the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated, that they possessed weapons and determination that could break any enemy. But they had also shown that when pushed to the brink, humans were willing to embrace technologies and tactics that civilized species rejected. The galaxy now knew that humanity was dangerous, more dangerous than the Zephyrians, more dangerous than any species that relied on conventional warfare. They had become the thing that lurked in the darkness between stars, the nightmare that alien children would hear about in whispered stories. Marcus approached her, carrying a data pad with casualty reports. "Commander, the final numbers are in. We lost over 300,000 civilians during the invasion, and our entire Ghost Protocol fleet. But the Zephyrian Empire is requesting a ceasefire. They're calling for peace negotiations." Elena nodded, still staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the surviving Zephyrian ships were carrying word of humanity's terrible new weapons back to their empire. Other alien civilizations would hear the stories and make their own calculations about whether humans were enemies to be conquered or neighbors to be respected. "Send a message to Earth Command," Elena said quietly. "Tell them Ghost Protocol was successful. The threat is neutralized." And Marcus, "Yes, Commander. Make sure they include this in the report. Humanity won this war by becoming something we never wanted to be. Let's make sure we never have to make that choice again." Elena continued to watch the stars, knowing that humanity had crossed a line from which there was no return. They had shown the galaxy their true face when cornered, and that face was terrifying. The question now was whether they could find their way back to being the species they wanted to be, or whether the darkness they had embraced would consume them from within. The Ghost Protocol had saved humanity, but as Elena looked out at the infinite cosmos, she wondered if they had saved their souls as well. The price of survival had been paid in full, and the galaxy would never be the same.